Okay, so you've brought some interesting stuff for us to dig into today
Yeah, definitely.
about how oil and gas companies are, looking at optimizing their operations.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically, we've got these materials on EAG Services,
Right.
which seems to be like a real player in the outsourced accounting space.
Yeah. Seems to be a leader in the space for sure.
And what we want to do today is really kind of get into the why.
Yeah.
Not just like the what of what they do, but why is this becoming a thing?
Right, exactly.
Why is this such a relevant solution in the industry?
Well, and I think it really comes down to the specific, the very unique, financial landscape
Yeah.
of oil and gas.
It's its own animal.
It is, yeah.
This isn't like,
It's not your typical
your standard
retail or, tech accounting.
Yeah, exactly. Like when you think about the complexities, I mean, they
Mm.
just pile up so fast.
For sure.
You've got these situations where the revenue from a single well
Right.
is split between all these
Dozens, if not hundreds.
Yeah, with these tiny little
Decimal interest.
these decimal interests.
Yeah.
And then you've got like the whole world of joint interest billing,
Oh, yeah.
which
Yeah.
is such
An intricate process.
just to figure out who owes what,
Right,
the
exactly.
shared operational expenses.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
And then you've got volumetric reconciliation on top of that,
Right.
which is basically making sure
Yeah.
that the oil and gas you're pulling out of the ground
Right.
is actually lining up with your financial records.
Yeah, if there's a discrepancy,
Right.
that's a huge red flag.
Absolutely. And on top of that, you've got really strict regulatory compliance,
Oh my gosh.
and that's constantly evolving.
Constantly. Yeah.
And then you've got the volatility of commodity prices,
Right.
which affects every decision.
Impacts everything.
And then just the asset-intensive operations.
Yes. The scale of
The scale of it, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot for any finance team to handle.
It's a lot. Yeah, and especially for these like smaller to mid-sized operators where the resources are already stretched thin.
Yeah, they don't have the bandwidth to have all that expertise in-house.
Right. And so that I think kind of sets the stage for where EG
Exactly.
steps in, The material suggests that they are a leader in this outsourced oil and gas accounting space.
Mm-hmm.
And they really seem to focus on delivering value in 3 key areas.
Yeah, and those are revenue processing excellence,
Okay.
streamline joint interest billing, or GIB,
Okay.
and volumetric accounting precision.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's start with the first one, the revenue processing.
Right.
You were talking about, these complex ownership decimals and all these different owners.
Yeah.
Can you just kind of like, for someone who's not in the industry,
Yeah.
really paint a picture of why this is such a significant hurdle?
Yeah, you can imagine a well that has, dozens, if not hundreds of different owners. You got individuals, trust companies,
Mm-hmm.
and they all hold a very small,
Right.
sliver of the production rights.
Right.
And keeping track of those percentages and who owns what. And,
Right.
making sure everyone gets paid the right amount,
Yeah.
responding to their inquiries.
Right.
It's a huge administrative burden.
It's gotta be.
And if those calculations are off,
Oh, yeah.
you're looking at legal issues.
Mhm.
You could be damaging relationships with royalty owners.
Yeah.
And that can be really costly in more ways than one.
So it's not just about, getting the numbers right.
Right.
It's about maintaining these relationships.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a lot more than just bookkeeping.
Yeah. Okay. So how does EAG navigate this web?
Well, they've got dedicated teams and really robust systems
Okay.
that maintain and meticulously verify those decimals.
Okay.
So they handle that whole revenue distribution process,
Got it.
from calculating payments to cutting and sending checks.
Mm-hmm.
And they even manage owner relations. So they answer owner questions.
Mm-hmm.
They address their concern.
Oh, wow. So they're like a...
And then on top of that,
Yeah.
they stay on top of the ever-changing regulatory landscape
Right.
so that they can generate all those compliance reports.
So they're on top of all that.
They're on top of all that.
Okay.
They manage the division orders,
Okay.
which define those ownership interests.
Right.
And then they even handle the transferring of those interests
Oh, wow.
when leases are bought and sold.
So that they're doing all of that.
They're doing all of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, there was a pretty amazing statistic from one of the midstream clients
Oh, yeah.
that was in these materials that we're looking at today.
Mm-hmm.
They saw an 87% reduction
Huge.
in distribution errors,
Mm-hmm.
and they cut their processing time in half.
Right. It's not just incremental improvement. That's a complete game changer.
Yeah, that's a complete game changer.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that. When you think about the downstream impact,
Right.
of those errors, like...
All the time spent tracking down discrepancies,
Yeah.
correcting payments, dealing with unhappy owners.
Yes.
And when you can eliminate those errors,
Yeah.
it's not just tidying up the books. You're actually
Yeah.
contributing to smoother operations and better stakeholder relationships.
So it has these ripple effects
It does, yeah.
across the entire business.
And then that time that they're saving frees up their internal finance team to focus on higher-level strategic initiatives.
Exactly. So they can be thinking about the bigger picture.
Exactly.
Okay, let's move on to the next one.
Okay.
Joint interest billing, or JIB.
Right.
You described this as like a potential nightmare.
It can be a nightmare, yeah.
What makes it so prone to problems?
Well, imagine a scenario where you've got several companies
Okay.
that are partnering to drill a new well
Okay.
or operate a pipeline.
Okay.
Every single cost associated with that operation,
Right.
from the drill bits to the specialized equipment to the labor and the fuel, all that has to be meticulously tracked
Mm-hmm.
and then allocated to each partner
Right.
based on their agreed-upon ownership stake.
Right.
So this requires incredibly detailed record keeping
Got it.
and then generating invoices for each partner.
And if something's off.
And if the documentation's not perfect or the allocation isn't transparent,
Uh-huh.
it just inevitably leads to disputes and delays in payments.
So it becomes a mess.
It can become a mess, yeah.
Okay, so how does EAG handle this?
Well, they've got a really systematic and automated approach.
Okay.
So they use robust systems for tracking and allocating all those joint operating expenses.
Okay.
And their automated billing processes generate detailed invoices
Okay.
with supporting documentation for every charge.
Okay.
So it creates a clear audit trail.
So everything's transparent.
Everything's transparent.
Got it.
And they also proactively manage dispute resolution.
Okay.
So if there are disagreements between partners,
Mm-hmm.
EAG acts as kind of like a neutral intermediary to address any of those disagreements.
Got it.
And then they can provide customized JIB reports
Okay.
that are tailored to the specific needs of each operator.
Wow. So they're really kind of taking care of the entire process.
Yeah, they're really streamlining the whole thing.
Yeah. And there was a quote from an upstream operator
Yeah.
in the materials that said, this saved their accounting team nearly 2 weeks each month.
2 weeks.
And that's like,
Yeah, that's like gaining an extra employee.
yeah, an extra employee
Yeah.
in terms of productive hours.
And it's not just about reducing workload.
Right.
It's about freeing up those highly skilled accounting professionals
Yeah.
to focus on analyzing the financial data,
Right.
identifying cost savings, and providing strategic insights to management.
Exactly. Yeah. They can actually do their jobs.
Exactly. Yeah, instead of being bogged down in all those manual billing processes.
Okay, now one of the things that the material really emphasizes as a differentiator is volumetric accounting precision. Now, for someone who's not directly in the industry, this might sound kind of abstract.
Yeah.
Why is this so critical in oil and gas?
Well, at its heart, the oil and gas business is about extracting and selling a physical product.
Right.
Barrels of oil, cubic feet of natural gas.
Mm-hmm.
And volumetric accounting is the process of tracking and reconciling the quantities of that product
Okay.
as it moves from the wellhead through transportation, storage, and
Yeah.
ultimately to sale.
So it's following it along the entire journey.
It's following it all the way through. So
Yeah.
it's basically about creating a direct link
Got it.
between the physical flow of the commodity and the financial records.
And if those numbers don't match up,
If those numbers don't match up, that's a problem.
yeah.
That could indicate measurement errors, operational inefficiencies,
Mm.
maybe even theft or regulatory noncompliance.
So it's a really important check and balance.
It is. It is.
Okay, so what specific services does EAG offer under this umbrella?
Well, they provide accurate production allocation. So they're determining how much oil and gas is attributable to each individual well
Okay.
or production facility.
Got it.
And then they reconcile those volumes across the entire value chain.
Oh, okay.
So they're comparing the production figures with the sales volumes
Mm-hmm.
and the inventory levels.
Yeah, okay.
And then they handle all those complex regulatory reporting requirements
Right.
related to production volumes.
Okay.
And they provide analysis of the production trends over time.
Mm-hmm.
And probably most importantly,
Yeah.
they integrate all that volumetric data
Yeah.
with the revenue accounting functions.
So it all ties together.
So it all ties together.
Got it.
Yeah.
So it sounds like this is really bridging a gap
Yeah.
between, the operational side of the business,
Right.
like the actual extraction of resources and the financial reporting,
Exactly.
that ultimately drives decision-making.
Right. Without that reconciliation of the physical volumes
Hmm.
to the financial values,
Yeah.
you're making decisions based on incomplete information.
It's like having blinders on.
Exactly.
Okay, so beyond these very specific processing functions,
Mm-hmm.
the materials also highlight that EAG is focused on this comprehensive financial reporting.
All right.
So it's not just about getting the numbers right, it's about turning that data
Right. It's about the insight.
into those insights.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They go way beyond basic bookkeeping.
Okay.
They deliver customized monthly financial statements,
Right.
management dashboards that display key performance indicators or KPIs,
Right.
all the necessary documentation for regulatory compliance,
Okay.
investor-ready financial packages for companies seeking funding,
Okay.
and even sophisticated cash flow forecasting,
Wow.
which lets companies model different scenarios
Mhm.
and plan for the future.
So they're really taking all of that data
Yeah.
and turning it into something that's useful.
Exactly. Yeah, it's
Okay.
about transforming that mountain of raw data into clear, actionable intelligence that management can actually use to steer the company.
So it's about empowering them to make better decisions,
It is.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, now this all sounds incredibly beneficial, in theory,
Right.
but what's the tangible impact in the real world?
Right.
So you've got these materials here that talk about the measurable impact
Yeah.
that EAG clients have reported.
Mm-hmm.
Let's dig into those numbers.
Okay. Well, clients have seen significant cost savings,
Okay.
like 30 to 45% reduction
Wow.
in their accounting-related expenses.
That's huge.
Yeah. And then they've also seen a big improvement in efficiency.
Okay.
60 to 70% decrease in the time it takes to close out their month-end financial statements.
So they're saving money. They're saving time.
Saving what? Saving time.
Yeah.
And it goes beyond that.
Okay.
They're eliminating those costly distribution errors.
Right.
They're reducing those time-consuming disputes with their joint venture partners.
Right.
They're getting better reporting capabilities
Mhm.
through those customized dashboards we talked about,
Yeah.
which leads to improved regulatory compliance and better business insights.
Right. So it's like a win-win across the board.
It is. Yeah, it really is.
And there's this quote from a CFO that
yeah.
just jumped out at me when I was looking at this.
Mhm.
He said, EAG doesn't just process our accounting. They've become strategic partners in our financial operations.
Yeah, I think that really highlights the level of value that they're providing.
It's not just about taking a task off your plate.
Right.
It's about bringing in a real expert.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a true partnership.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say a company is considering this.
Mm-hmm.
A big question is always around the transition process.
Yeah.
It's a big deal to move a critical function
Uh-huh.
to an external provider.
Yeah, it can feel risky.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
And luckily, the material outlines EAG's onboarding process.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what are the key phases involved.
Well, they've got a very structured 6-phase approach.
Yeah.
And it's all designed to minimize disruption.
Okay.
So it starts with the discovery phase, where EG really works closely with the client to understand their current accounting processes, identify their specific challenges, and define their goals.
So they're really getting to know the client.
They're getting to know the client, yeah.
Okay.
And then the next phase is solution design,
Okay.
where they develop that customized service package
Okay.
that's tailored to the client's needs.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all.
It's not cookie cutter, no.
Okay.
And then there's transition planning,
Okay.
where they create a clear roadmap
Got it.
with milestones and responsibilities for both teams.
So everyone knows what's happening.
Everyone's on the same page.
Okay.
And then knowledge transfer is really crucial.
Okay.
That's where EAG is getting a complete understanding of the client's historical data, their processes, and any specific nuances.
Okay.
Then they move into progressive implementation,
Okay.
which is a phased approach to rolling out the services.
Okay.
So it minimizes any impact on operations.
So they're not just flipping a switch.
No, it's very gradual.
Okay.
And then finally, and this is really important,
Yeah.
it's not just a one-time setup.
Right.
They emphasize continuous optimization.
Okay.
So they're regularly reviewing and refining the processes
Okay.
to ensure ongoing efficiency and to adapt to any changes in the client's business or the regulatory environment.
So it's an ongoing relationship.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, this sounds like a really well thought out approach.
Yeah.
And it's nice because we have this quote from a client who recently onboarded with EG, and they said the transition was remarkably smooth.
That's great.
And there was no interruption to their operational continuity.
Yeah, that's a testament to that process.
That speaks volumes.
It does.
Yeah. Okay, so finally, let's talk about what really differentiates a specialist like EAG from a general accounting firm.
Right.
And the material really emphasizes their deep industry-specific expertise.
It's crucial, yeah.
So why is this such a significant advantage?
Well, the oil and gas industry operates with a very unique set of rules and regulations. It's got its own terminology.
Right.
And a general accounting firm just won't have that same level of understanding.
Right. They might know accounting, but
Right, they know accounting.
they don't know oil and gas.
But they don't know oil and gas.
Right.
And EAG only focuses on oil and gas.
Okay.
So their teams have a wealth of industry-specific knowledge and experience.
Right.
They know the specialized software platforms like Quorum, OGSys, Inertia.
Okay.
They understand the regulatory landscape. And they've got experience working with companies of all sizes.
So they've seen it all.
They've seen it all.
Okay.
And they invest in continuous professional development,
Got it.
specifically focused on the energy industry.
So they're constantly staying up to date.
Exactly.
Okay, so it sounds like that deep expertise translates into a number of benefits for their clients.
It does, yeah.
So you've got a faster and more efficient implementation process. Right. Fewer errors. And ultimately more valuable insights.
More valuable insights for sure.
Because they really understand the industry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can hit the ground running and provide guidance that a generalist firm just couldn't offer.
Right.
Yeah.
So it really is about having that partner who speaks your language.
It speaks your language.
Yeah, and understands the industry.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
it seems clear that for oil and gas companies who are dealing with all this complexity and volatility, outsourcing those specialized accounting functions to a firm like EAG isn't just about, streamlining an operation or cutting costs.
Right.
It's really about leveraging that expertise to gain a strategic advantage.
100%. Yeah.
And that's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Yeah. By tapping into their knowledge and efficient processes, companies can improve their efficiency, reduce those errors, get better financial visibility and control, and free up their internal teams to focus on, exploration, production, delivery of energy.
The stuff that really matters.
The stuff that really matters.
Yeah, and, thinking about everything I've talked about today,
Yeah.
The revenue divisions, the joint interest billing, the volumetric accounting, it makes me wonder, in any specialized industry,
Right.
how could a more strategic approach to some of these back office functions
Right.
really unlock potential that might be being overlooked?
Yeah. It's a great question for any business leader to consider.
Yeah, and for those in the oil and gas industry, who are listening to this and thinking, this sounds interesting.
Yeah.
The materials that we were looking at today point to eginc.com is a good place to start.
A great resource.
Yeah, for more information.
Yeah. And you can request a customized assessment of your company's needs.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for bringing this to the table today.
Yeah, this was fun.
This was a great deep dive.
It was, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, until next time.
Sounds good.